Hello! Shoyan here. I'm a carpenter based in Japan. I recently spent 2 days cutting the barge boards, fascia boards, and roof boards for the eaves of the house. Today, I'll process and plane the pre-cut timbers. The timber I processed today is these 4 logs to be used as pillars, and the pine wood timber that will be exposed. I'm going to plane these timbers. Let's start. These 4 polished logs will be used as pillars on the site. One will be in the center of the living room, and the other 3 will be installed side by side on the porch where the car can be parked. The porch's height is still undetermined, so I work on the pillars inside the house first. Since there are logs, I'm unsure what they look like until I open the packaging and remove the plastic sheet. Each pillar has a unique look, with individual dents, protrusions, grains, and so on. This wood is Kitayama cedar. It is a log from Kyoto and is a brand name wood. Kitayama is said to be the most managed mountain in Japan and is very well cared for. So I'm sure there's no hidden miss, but I have to look at the surface of each piece to be sure. I use a pillar with lots of branches in the other video. There was also a unique shaped log from the Kitayama region. In the past, a log with many branches like that was not produced. They only had a few protruded knots, but it seems a variety of unique shaped logs are produced nowadays. I have finished writing the names on these 4 logs. I first install one inside the house. I select the most straight, beautiful surface, and easy to process log. This log will be in the middle of the living room in a large kitchen, about 7 meters by 7 meters area. There will be a 360mm beam on top, and the sill on the bottom, so the tenon is used on both the top and the bottom. The bottom tenon is not visible because it's on the sill. In contrast, the top will be joined with the exposed girder, so the tenon shoulder is also visible. I first cut at the point where the tenon end comes at both ends. By rolling the log, I can cut it straight with a circular saw without shifting it, since the log is easy to cut. I confirm the position of the sewari and set the log not to move. Then I measure and mark the center on the top and bottom. There are many ways to do this, such as using a laser, but I use a leveler vertically. If you use a leveler, it's important to use it in the same direction on the other side. It doesn't make a big difference, but you should not flip the leveler. Set it on the other side in the same direction. There is no need to draw a center line along the entire length of the pillar, because I will use a square to draw it when cutting the tenon shoulder. Therefore, I mark the center of each location with a pencil, and use it as a reference when using the square. Some people attach tape and draw a cross mark carefully, but even if you do this, you will only be able to mark the length of the square. I use an HB pencil that can be erased easily to mark only necessary positions. Then I measure a right angle based on the center mark on the top and the bottom, and cut the tenon shoulder. When cutting the shoulder, moving your dominant eye right above the square is important. I start cutting. Many people prefer to cut these kinds of tenons with a circular saw, but if you use a sharp handsaw, You can cut it much faster than with a circular saw. Some adjustments may be necessary with a chisel, but the finish would be better with a handsaw. In the old days, young apprentices lined up to hand-cut tenons on the pillars. Our handsaws often wandered and tilted when making a rip cut, and the tenon became distorted and thick. We had to fix it with a chisel in those days. However, sometimes the tenons were not fixed, and the framing work started. It was not too bad if there was only one distorted tenon, but I remember we banged the timber a lot when 2 or 3 of them were in a row. The ideal length of the tenon is 29mm if the mortise is 30mm deep, and the end of the tenon won't attach to the end wall. If the tenon is 2mm wider, it won't fit, which is a big problem. That is why we were often told to draw the vertical line properly and straight when we cut the tenons of first-time apprentices. I measured the length of the 3 pillars for the porch. These 3 logs will have foundation stones under them. I place the stones, then stretch a string over the sill and mark the length of each pillar on the stupid stick. You can never go wrong doing it this way. I'll cut the pillar using this stick. When using foundation stones, I join the pillar to the stone in the workshop before bringing it to the site. I will secure the foundation stone in the pillar with a bolt from the bottom. I make sure that the top and bottom center markings won't shift. If the stone is tilted, it won't look good even if the bolt is tightened securely. It's important to cut a square tenon so that it will not move. I won't make a hole in the pillar. There is a sawari in the pillar, so the coach screw won't get secured if I make a hole in the center. So basically, I do not drill a hole in the bottom of a pillar that has a sawari. The thickness of the log is based on the top end of the log. As the beam is 120mm, the top end of the log is also 120mm. Since the 120mm is about the top side, some logs had 135mm to 140mm at the bottom root side. Therefore, I'm using 150mm square stone. It is quite heavy, probably close to 20 kilograms. It's unusual to attach such a heavy stone. I can barely hold it. Three of these will be lined up in a row. It's a little dynamic. I don't think there will be a problem with one of them. Now I plane the exposed beam. There is also a girder, a floor beam for the second floor. It's a big piece of pine wood. The beams in the living room and stairwell will be exposed. I planed them. Pre-cutting does not include the finishing work, so a carpenter does this by hand. I first lightly plane the wood with an electric plane before planing by hand. This is because it's difficult to remove scratches that are made when using a machine. I curve the bottom upward about 2 to 3 millimeters. I lightly plane with the electric planer and then use a hand plane. It's not easy to remove the scratches just by applying the electric plane. Scratches from the pre-cutting machine inevitably remain. If I plane it too much, the finish will be too loose. Pine is an easy wood to plane with a blade. For this site, there will be 11 to 12 exposed flat timbers. It's more than other houses have these days. When we built houses in the past, we planed a lot of flat timber such as beams, kamoy, and shiki. They were all made of pine and were exposed. 90% of the columns were made of Japanese cypress, and they were exposed too. It took more than half a month just to plane them. You can't see much timber in modern houses, but in the old days, we planed and exposed the wood. Now that dinner is over, I start setting washers through the bolts, a little bit tipsy. I really don't like to set the washers alone in the daytime. It's the best way to set the washers with a little help from alcohol and a few other people working at night. It's also quicker. These days, I carry bolts in buckets. I used to carry them in cardboard in the old days. It's much easier to use a bucket for plaster. Today is 2 days before framing, which we call tatemae. We start the framing preparation. All we have to do is to install the columns, then the window lintels, and headers. Just doing this makes the first half hour the next morning much easier. Since it is 2 days before, there is no scaffolding yet. The scaffolding is going to be put up tomorrow. We usually do the framing preparation the day before. However, the Japanese calendar has a lucky day called Taiyan, and the day before Taiyan is almost certainly a very unlucky day called Butsumetsu. So if the tatemae is done on the Taiyan, the day before the tatemae is often Butsumetsu. By installing the columns 2 days beforehand, we can avoid Butsumetsu. That's why I decided to work on this day. It is also easier to bring in materials when there is no scaffolding. We will work at our own pace. While we are preparing 2 days before the ridge beam installation day called Honbi, I feel that the tatemae will be a graceful day. In Japan, there are customs involved in framing days. One is called tatemae and another is jotoshiki. It's hard to tell the difference between them, but tatemae is the day set the pillars, beams, and roofing at the top are installed. A day called jotonohi is also included in tatemae. If the building is 661 square meters in area, it will take 3 to 4 days to complete the tatemae. If the ridge beam is installed on the 4th day, a ceremony called jotoshiki will be held on that day. These 3 days and 4 days are also called tatemae. Therefore, tatemae is not always the same day as jotonohi. Strictly speaking, this framing preparation is also part of the tatemae. We also call the ridge beam installation day a homi. When installing the ridge beam, we pour Japanese sake called omiki, attach 2 long ropes, and install the ridge beam while singing a song. That is the day of jotonohi. So the days of tatemae and jotonohi may seem the same, but they are not. Now I have finished hand processing in the workshop, carrying the planed materials, and installing columns, lintels, and headers. The framing preparation is all done. The tatemae will take place in 2 days. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.